What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life. Today's going to be a cartridge talk episode. And it's been a little bit since I've done a cartridge talk. I'll be honest, I just kind of ran out of ones I considered good cartridges to talk about. There's plenty of other cartridges I haven't talked about. A lot of those are like specialty bench rest cartridges, which are really cool in their own way, but unless you're a bench rest shooter, don't really apply. But today, by God's grace, I am in Saum, Idaho, living here for a little bit. And Saum, Idaho, if you're not familiar with kind of the ambiance and story of Saum, Idaho, kind of conjures up thoughts of big game hunting. And today's cartridge is definitely a good cartridge for that. A little bit niche, a little bit not your average, not probably in your Big 5 or even Big 10 for big game hunting cartridges. But in this kind of country, on that Idaho-Montana border, I think if it's popular anywhere, it's probably popular around here for this kind of area. What are we talking about? Well, you know, because you probably read the title when you clicked on it, unless it just auto-played. The Saum, the 7mm short-action Ultra Magnum. It's a mouthful, Saum. No wonder that's why they just say Saum. The 7mm short-action Ultra Mag. This one's actually older than I thought. It goes all the way back to 2001. And to give credit where credit is due, I'm reading from the Cartridges of the World book. That was a gift from a patron. I'm going to read from it real quick. In 2001, Remington introduced a 7mm Remington short-action Ultra Mag cartridge as a competitor to Winchester's 7mm Winchester Short Magnum. Ballistic performance of the Remington and Winchester offering is similar. The 7mm Remington short-action Ultra Magnum easily exceeds or equals 7mm Remington Magnum performance while fitting into easy carrying, fast-handling rifles such as the short-action Remington Model 7. I'm going to stop right there and interject. The Remington Model 7 is perhaps one of my favorite bolt-action rifles. I really like the Remington Model 7. I don't think I would want one in this cartridge, but I do like the Remington Model 7. Based on a shortened 300 Ultra Magnum case, which is self-derived from a slightly modified 404 Jeffrey case of African fame, the 7mm Remington short-action Ultra Magnum is slightly shorter and smaller in diameter than its Winchester counterpart. Short fat cases burn powder very efficiently since the primer's flash ignites a larger area of the packed gunpowder. The case is unbelted and head space on the shoulder for improved shoulder tolerance. Remington barrels for this cartridge use a twist rate of 1 and 9 1/4, which is weird that it's 9 1/4, but shooters are, that was an interjection there, that's not from the original text. Shooters are cautioned never to fire a 7mm Remington short-action Ultra Magnum in a 7mm WSM chambered rifle, as the head space would be excessive, leading to possible injury or firearm damage. And I'm going to go ahead and interject. You shouldn't fire a different head-stamped cartridge really ever in your rifle, unless you really, really know what you're doing. There are notable exceptions to that. Like, if it's only stamped 357 in a revolver, you can safely fire 38 Special plus P, things like that. But in like a center-fired, modern, bottleneck Spitzer type cartridge, don't mix and match, right? It's not because, oh, it'll fit in the chamber, so I should just be able to go ahead and do it. That's not how that works. Stick with the head stamp matching your barrel. Anyway, the Saum. Okay, the obvious comparison to this is the 7mm Remington Magnum, right? And the 7mm Remington Magnum is, I'm going to go ahead and say, one of the best all-around Western hunting cartridges. It just is. It's a good all-around Western hunting cartridge. It just is. It's taken many an elk, many of pretty much anything in Western North America. I'd want a little bit heavier bullet, I think, for big brown bears, but other than that, it's a good cartridge. And I'm sure it's taken plenty of those too. It's just not ideal, in my opinion. But for this kind of wide open Wyoming, Montana, Idaho country, it's a good choice. In fact, I saved up money from a couple of my first jobs, being a lifeguard and stuff, and this is back in the Tidewater, Mid-Atlantic United States, and I saved up and I would study ballistics charts to tell you what kind of ballistics nerd I was way back in the 90s before I joined the Marine Corps. And I would sit on my lifeguard chair when it was rainy and there was nobody around or whatever, and I would read ballistics tables. What a ballistics nerd, right? That's me. I had come to the conclusion that the 7mm Rem mag was the best. I needed that. And a poor boy from the southeastern United States, needs a 7mm Remington Magnum, about like a new driver needs a Porsche Cayenne. just you don't need that much. Don't need that much gun for hunting in the South. If you want one, that's fine, but you definitely don't need it. I hunted black bear, I hunted whitetail, I hunted a bunch of other stuff, but for big game, that was pretty much it. You don't need a 7 Rem mag for that, especially the kind of terrain I was hunting. But I decided, that was the best, and that's what I wanted, and I got it. And just to tell you that I have a long history with the 7mm Rem mag. And in fact, when I left being the commander of a tactical team to be a professional big game hunter and guide, my team was really, really nice, and they didn't have to, and they pitched in together and bought me a 7mm Rem mag for a professional big game hunting rifle. And so I have a history with the 7 Rem mag. It's a great cartridge. However, it's not without its misgivings. As alluded to in that text, it is inefficient. It's what you might consider overboard. If you look at one of my all-time favorite cartridges, the 280 Ackley Improved, or just a regular 280 for that matter, you're having to shove a lot more powder behind that given bullet for a little bit better performance. And it does give you better performance. It's a Magnum for a reason. It's called a Magnum for a reason. But it's not efficient. You're getting a lot more powder for a little bit more velocity. So if you're looking at from an efficiency standpoint, nobody would put a 7mm Rem mag in the efficient category. What it has going for it is it's very abundant. It's very popular. And even though it's not efficient, it's not a light recoiling round, but it's not crazy punishing. I would consider an average shooter, not like a new shooter. I wouldn't give a new shooter a 7mm Rem mag, but for an avid hunter, it's not crazy in recoil for your average weighted hunting rifle, like what I would consider quintessential, Ruger 77 all-weather and 7mm Rem mag, weighing about 8-ish pounds, right? Good pairing. It's not overly punishing for that. But again, it's not efficient. And there's much ado about nothing in the hunting and tactical world, I think, about long action versus short action. I would love to see the actual time difference, like on a clock, like on a competitive course of fire. And I don't compete in precision rifle anymore, but it would be cool to see somebody run pretty much identical rifles, and I don't have 2 identical rifles like this. But maybe if somebody out there wanted to do that, or if somebody knows about it, post it in the comments. But somebody that runs pretty much an identical rifle in a long action and a short action in different courses of fire, not just like emptying at a berm. Engaging different targets, moving in practical type scenarios. What's the time difference over, let's say, 10 shots between a long action and a short action? I'm all about gun nerd stuff. You guys probably know that about me, but I'm also a realist, and I don't know that it really makes much of a difference. You're talking fractions of an inch of difference between running that bolt back and forward. We look at some of the, like one of the classic quintessential fast bolt action rifles, the Lee Enfield. Right, that's fast for a lot of reasons, but it's a long action. So I gotta believe the long action versus short action is not as important as one would have us believe, as far as that goes. But here's a reality. A lot of people perceive that it's better. And there are some other benefits. Most notably, weight. If you're looking for a lightweight, handy mountain rifle, you can make a long action pretty light and handy. Go look at a Kimber Mountain Ascent. A super light rifle. Long action, controlled round feed. It's awesome in a lot of ways. But in general, have the exact same type of action, let's say a Remington Model 700, long action versus short action. The short action is obviously going to be lighter. You need less material. So that's an actual real-world benefit. Ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. Coming from an old infantryman here. So there is that actual benefit. And since a lot of competitive and super hyper-accurate shooters like a short action, a lot of the really high-end custom rifles are geared towards short action. Not all, and you can certainly get really nice rifles in long actions and controlled round feeds, but I'm talking in general here. That is what I am talking about. So short action has the advantage there. So if one wanted a good short action Western rifle, long range, pack and a punch like a 7 Rem mag, but they wanted it in a short action for those reasons heretofore stated, and they wanted a modern cartridge with good efficiency, check that box. And then you've decided, especially if you're a hand loader, because this is more of a hand loader's cartridge, not that it has to be, but you've decided that 7mm, for a lot of reasons, is a good choice, and it is. You get a wide range of bullet weights. You can go light and fast. You can go really high BC, high sectional density, either one of those or both, for your bigger, beefier game. Beefy as in a bull or cow elk, or even a moose. Your big heavy 7s are going to be plenty for that. 7 is a fantastic number for the kind of good all-around hunting. Looking in this cartridges of the world, looking at a Remington factory load, this is a Remington cartridge. They load a 160 grain nozzler partition, which is, I would surmise, would be a superb load. I've never had this exact cartridge, but nozzler partitions have a fantastic reputation. 160 grain nozzler in our 7mm, fantastic choice. It lists that cooking at 2960 feet per second. A 160 nozzler partition. That's a powerhouse. And you're talking energy 3112. Exact same book, exact same manual. Lists a factory load for the Remington. I'll leave that in there. The 7mm Remington Magnum with 160 grain at 2950. So within 10, it's 10 feet a second difference between that and the short action Ultra Mag. So you're getting 7mm Rem Mag performance in a short action and more efficient. If you don't know about efficiency, it also plays into more than just how much powder you use. There's also a thing called ejecta mass, and that a lot of people may not, but you're supposed to include the amount of powder in the recoil calculation. So even though you may shoot 2 exact same bullets at the exact same velocity, let's say you hand loaded and you got rid of that 10 feet a second. If these 2 loads are launching that same bullet at the exact same feet per second out of the exact same weight rifle, you added a little bit of weight to the one, so the short action and long action, you just chambered a long action rifle and short action Ultra Mag, which you could do. Just for a thought experiment here, you have both rifles, same weight of the rifle, same bullet going at the exact same velocity. That amount of powder also counts for what's called ejecta mass. So that 7mm Rem Mag should be giving you more recoil, even though it's not giving you any more performance than the 7 Saum. Getting back to that 7 Saum being more efficient. So it has some real world advantages, right? It's not just because you want a Gucci niche cartridge. It's not all rose petals and not thorns in this 7 Saum garden, though. It's a niche cartridge, so if you hand load, and even if you hand load, cases are probably not growing on trees for this round. But if you hand load, once you have the cases, and especially if it's a hunting application, you probably don't need, hundreds and hundreds of them. If you're just looking to buy a rifle off the shelf and go buy ammo at a local big box store, probably the 7 Saum is not for you. 7 Saum is probably for you if you're getting a custom-built short-action rifle. You decided you want short action, because me, if I were doing this and I were building a custom rifle for this, I would just go with a longer action, and I would go with the 280 Ackley Improved. Talk about efficiency, and it's become fairly available. But if you wanted a short action and you wanted a really good all-around Western short action 7mm cartridge, this would not be a bad choice. It'd be between this one and the 7mm WSM, the Winchester Short Mag, which probably should deserve its own talk. But the 7 Saum would be a good choice. And that's really where it lies. A fairly niche cartridge, unless you bought it when it was kind of coming out and a big thing in the early aughts. Lots of cartridges get introduced. Every year there's several, and very few actually catch on and make it to the big time. Last real one I can think of around the later aughts, and that was the 6.5 Creedmoor. Really become one of the staple cartridges. but most cartridges that get introduced every year, new cartridge, they really kind of fade into obscurity. This one is doing okay in its niche application, a high-end custom-built short-action Western rifle. And if that's what you're looking for, you may consider the 7 Saum. With that, thanks for listening to this, Better Know a Cartridge. These cartridge talk episodes do fairly well, even some of the really obscure cartridges. Especially on YouTube. If you're listening to this on YouTube, I'm primarily a podcaster, so if you like this, check out Gunfighter Life. We talk about what I would consider a lot more substantial stuff than just the gun nerd stuff, and that's fun too. But check out Gunfighter Life on Spotify, on iTunes, on iHeartRadio. There's a new thing that I've seen that seems to be doing pretty well, and that's Pocket Casts. But anyway, check out podcasts. It's like short audio books or long-form talk radio where it's talking about stuff you actually care about, not what famous person is doing this with some other famous person or what scandal there is, but stuff you actually want to hear about. If you're listening to this on YouTube, consider checking out the podcast Gunfighter Life on one of those podcast things, even if you're not normally into podcasts. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, all that stuff. With that, I appreciate you listening. Throw in a tactical tip and a tactical verse of the day. As somebody who's been a professional big game hunter and guide, and if you're listening about the 7 Saum, you're probably a hunter. Maybe not, but if you listen to Gunfighter Life regularly, you know I'm big on dry fire. Dry fire doesn't just apply to your defensive go-to fighting handgun. It very much does, and that's where I do the bulk of my dry fire. That's the gun I have on me most of the time. And handguns are the hardest gun to master, but I also dry fire quite a bit with my go-to hunting rifles. I am primarily and enjoy spot and stalk and still hunting. I'm not the kind of guy that rides around on a quad and hunts off a tripod or even a bipod. I'm much more of a shoot from standing, spot and stalk, maybe kneeling, kind of hunting that I like to do. You can dry fire most of that, especially if you know how to call your shots. I saw so many missed opportunities as a professional big game hunter, and it wasn't because their rifle didn't shoot sub-MOA, and it wasn't because they didn't have the latest and greatest carbon fiber bipod. It was because they did most of their shooting at a range on a bench, and their training, and not much dry firing. You can dry fire in all these awkward positions. You don't even need to spend any money. You probably already have the rifle. Most modern center fire rifles, it's not going to cost you money to dry fire. You're not going to break anything. Practice, bringing that rifle up to your shoulder quickly. Pick out a target, reasonable ranges, dry fire, and getting that rifle and getting your sights on target quickly and giving a slow, steady press from standing, from kneeling. Because in the field, you rarely, especially the kind of hunting that I like to do, you rarely get that perfect opportunity. And you're probably not going to have a bench sitting out there. And a lot of times out west, it's fairly difficult to get in prone, especially if that animal is on the move. Oscar Mike, right? Getting down in the prone in that tall grass and stuff often means you lose your shot. Being comfortable, shooting offhand, shooting from the kneeling, shooting with a hasty sling. And those are all things you can do dry fire. You want to we're getting into midsummer. This is the time to be honing those hunting skills. Dry fire those kind of things. So many times as a guide out here, I didn't have a shot, but I was watching. They had several opportunities for a shot. They just weren't comfortable in those conditions. It wasn't that their rifle wasn't up to it. It wasn't that the cartridge wasn't up to it. It wasn't that their whatever piece of kit wasn't up to it. It's because they were so uncomfortable unless they had really, really ideal conditions that they weren't comfortable taking the shot. You do that kind of dry firing, even more than live firing, you'll know how much your reticle and stuff moves. You should have a good idea of what kind of shots you can make and take and how long it takes you to get into those positions. And the more repetition you do getting into those positions, the faster you'll be able to do them in the field, which may mean the difference between a nice 6x6 elk feeding your family or disappearing into the timber because you were trying to get in a perfect shooting position. Anyway, that's my advice for tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day plays into this one pretty well. Proverbs 12. The lazy do not roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.